The children were laughing when the lights went out. Park Ji-woo had been standing at the front of the observation deck, pointing at the purple nebula outside the window, telling her students about how stars were born inside clouds of gas and dust. The kids sat cross-legged on the floor, their faces lit up by the glow of space. A boy named Taemin kept raising his hand to ask if they could name one of the stars. A girl named Soyi was drawing the nebula in her notebook with colored pencils. It was a normal morning on the colony ship Morning Star, and Ji-woo loved every second of it. The Morning Star was not a warship. It was not armed. It carried 2,000 civilians across the deep black of space toward a newly prepared world in the Hana system. Families, engineers, farmers, doctors, teachers like Ji-woo, and 600 children who had been promised a new home under a new sun. The ship moved slowly and gently through the stars, and nobody on board had any reason to be afraid. Humanity in the year 2487 was not feared. Humans had spread across dozens of star systems, built cities on moons, and sent diplomats to nearly every known species in the galaxy. But they were not considered powerful. The elder species of the Galactic Neutral Assembly saw humans the way a grown animal sees a puppy. Cute, harmless, emotional. Humans made beautiful music and told wonderful stories and cried at sad endings. They hugged their children in public. They built parks on their warships. The galaxy looked at humanity and saw a species too soft to be taken seriously. The Velshi Dominion saw the same thing, and they saw opportunity. The Velshi were a species built for conquest. Their bodies were tall and armored, with natural bone plates, their eyes black and cold, like polished stones. They had built their empire by swallowing smaller civilizations whole, and their warlord commander, a brutal leader named Dravik, had spent the last year testing the edges of human territory. Small raids, quick retreats, probing attacks meant to measure the response. The response was always the same. Diplomats, letters, requests for dialogue. Dravik read each response and smiled with all 3 rows of his teeth. He decided it was time to send a message. Not to humanity, to the galaxy. The Velshi strike force dropped out of hyperspace around the Morning Star without warning. 5 warships, each one bristling with weapons, surrounded the slow-moving colony ship like wolves circling a lamb. The Morning Star's communication systems were jammed instantly. The captain, a kind old man named Cho Pilsu, tried to send a distress signal, but the channels were dead. He stood on his bridge and watched the Velshi ships move closer, and he understood what was about to happen. The Velshi did not destroy the Morning Star. That was not the point. They crippled it. Precise strikes hit the engines, the shields, the life support backups. The ship shuddered and groaned like a living thing in pain. Then the boarding pods came. Velshi soldiers poured into the corridors. They were enormous, nearly 3 meters tall, and they moved with the calm confidence of predators who knew their prey could not fight back. They dragged people from their rooms. They kicked open doors. They shoved families into the cargo hold and forced them to their knees. And they recorded everything. Dravik had ordered the entire assault to be broadcast on open relay channels. Dozens of species across the galaxy could see the feed in real time. The Velshi soldiers held up their weapons and looked into the cameras, and Dravik's voice played over the footage, deep and pleased with itself. Let this be what happens to species who claim stars they cannot defend. Ji-woo heard the explosions from the observation deck. She felt the ship shake beneath her feet. The children screamed, and for one terrible second, she froze. Then Soyi grabbed her hand, and the fear burned away into something harder and sharper. She moved fast. She grabbed the emergency access panel on the wall and pulled it open. Behind it was a maintenance corridor, narrow and dark, meant for repair crews. She pushed the children through one by one, counting them as they went. 19. She had 19 students with her. She told them to be quiet, to hold each other's hands, and to not let go, no matter what they heard. They heard terrible things. Jiwoo sealed the bulkhead behind them and led the children deeper into the maintenance tunnels. Her left arm was broken. She had hit it against the wall when the ship shook. She did not look at it. She kept moving. Behind them, through the metal walls, she could hear boots stomping, people crying, and sounds she would never be able to forget. They hid for 9 hours. 9 hours in the dark, with 19 children pressed together in a space meant for pipes and cables. Jiwoo held Soyi on her lap and whispered stories to keep the little ones calm. She made up a story about a brave starship that could fly faster than light and always found its way home. Taemin whispered that he wanted to be the captain of that ship someday. Jiwoo told him he would be. When the Velshi finally left, they left behind ruin. The morning star drifted in silence, broken and cold. Of the 2,000 people on board, 734 were dead. 198 of them were children. Jiwoo crawled out of the maintenance tunnel with 2 broken arms and blood running down her face. She found the nearest console, smashed and flickering, and spent 40 minutes trying to activate the distress beacon with her elbows and her chin. When it finally lit up, she collapsed on the floor next to it and held Soi's hand and stared at the ceiling and did not blink for a very long time. A Terran patrol ship found the Morning Star 16 hours later. The captain, a young officer named Bae Jungwoo, docked with the wreckage and walked through the corridors. He saw the blood on the walls. He saw the small shoes scattered on the floor. He saw things that would follow him into his dreams for the rest of his life. He returned to his bridge. He sat down. His hands were shaking. He opened a channel to Earth Command, and his voice cracked when he spoke. They killed our children. The message traveled across human space at the speed of light. It reached every colony, every station, every ship, every home. And something changed. Something deep and old and dangerous woke up in the hearts of 10 billion human beings. The galaxy had made a mistake. The galaxy had confused gentleness for weakness. It would not make that mistake again. The galaxy expected fire. It expected screaming broadcasts and angry threats and desperate emotional humans shaking their fists at the stars. That was what soft species did when they were hurt. They cried, they begged, they made noise, and then they did nothing. Humanity went silent. For 3 days after the Morning Star massacre, not a single human diplomat spoke at the Galactic Neutral Assembly. Not a single military broadcast left Terran space. Trade ships continued their routes. Colony worlds maintained their schedules. From the outside, it looked like humanity had simply accepted what had happened and moved on, too afraid or too broken to respond. Several alien ambassadors quietly began drafting proposals to redistribute Terran border systems to their own species. If the humans would not defend their territory, someone else would take it. They did not understand what silence meant to humans. On Earth, in the deep underground levels of the Unified Parliament building in Geneva, the leaders of humanity sat around a long table and watched the footage from the Morning Star. Nobody spoke while it played. When it ended, the room was so quiet that you could hear the air recyclers humming in the walls. The Prime Secretary, a woman named Oh Minji, looked at the faces around her and saw the same expression on every single one of them. It was not grief. It was not rage. It was something colder and more patient than either of those things. It was decision. The vote was unanimous, not on whether to respond, but on how completely to respond. Admiral Kang Do-hun received the orders while he was aboard a peacekeeping station near the Orion border. He was a tall, quiet man with gray hair and calm eyes. The kind of man who spoke softly and never raised his voice. In 40 years of military service, he had fought exactly 3 battles. He had won all 3 in under an hour. The rest of his career had been spent preventing wars through patience, diplomacy, and the careful art of making enemies realize that fighting was not worth the cost. The galaxy knew him as a peacekeeper. They did not know what he was capable of when peace was no longer an option. He watched the Morning Star footage alone in his quarters. He watched it once. He closed the screen. He sat still for a long time, his hands flat on the table, his breathing slow and steady. Then he opened a channel to Fleet Command and said 5 words. "I accept. Begin Operation Lullaby." The name was not a joke. It was not meant to be clever or ironic. It was named after the last thing those children should have heard before they slept. A lullaby. The operation was humanity's way of keeping that promise, even if it was too late. Across Terran space, things began to move. Shipyards that had been quiet for decades powered up their forges. Factory stations hidden inside asteroid fields, built in secret over generations, opened their doors for the first time. Retired officers sent in their reactivation codes. Civilian engineers walked into military recruitment offices and said they wanted to help. Corporations donated fuel, metal, and technology without being asked and without expecting anything in return. A 90-year-old woman on Mars who had been a ship designer before she retired sent in a set of blueprints she had been working on in her free time. The blueprints were for a new type of missile guidance system. It was brilliant. The galaxy did not know about any of this. The galaxy did not know that humanity had been quietly preparing for this moment for over a century. Not because humans wanted war, but because they had always known, somewhere deep in their bones, that the universe was not safe. That someday, something terrible would come for their families. And when that day arrived, they would be ready. Director Baek Sun-ho of the United Earth Intelligence Division briefed Do-hyun aboard the command ship Steady Hand. He was a small man, with sharp eyes and a habit of tapping his fingers on things when he was thinking. He laid out everything they knew about the Velshi Dominion. 6,000 warships, 12 colony worlds, a home world called Velshi Prime, heavily defended and surrounded by orbital stations. The Velshi military was larger than the Terran fleet on paper. Sun-ho tapped his fingers on the table and said, "On paper." Do-hyun nodded. He understood. Numbers did not win wars. Will did. Captain Yoon Nari arrived at the Steady Hand 3 days later to take command of the Vanguard warship, Iron Cradle. She was young for a captain, only 34, with short black hair and a voice that could cut through steel. She was precise, disciplined, and absolutely without mercy when it came to protecting the people she served. She had read the casualty list from the Morning Star on her way to the fleet, scanning the names quickly and efficiently until she reached one that made her stop. Her niece, 8 years old. She had wanted to be a marine biologist on the new colony world. Nari stared at the name for a long time. She did not cry. She had cried once, alone in her quarters, and that was enough. She closed the list, walked to her command console, checked every weapon system on the Iron Cradle twice, and reported to Do-hyun that her ship was ready. Diplomat Han Yuna sent a single message to the Galactic Neutral Assembly from Earth before communications went dark. The Terran government formally notifies the Assembly that a state of military action now exists between the United Earth Navy and the Velshi Dominion. This action will continue until those responsible for the attack on the civilian vessel Morning Star are surrendered to Terran custody. No further communication on this matter will be issued. The Assembly received the message and held a debate that lasted 6 hours. They issued a statement urging restraint from all parties. Then, they moved on to the next item on their schedule. They would regret that. In orbit above Earth's moon, the fleet gathered. 4,000 warships. Carriers, destroyers, frigates, and cruisers, arranged in formation so vast that it blocked the light from the stars behind it. They were painted dark gray and black, and they carried no banners, no flags, no decorations. They looked like exactly what they were. A fist, closed and ready. Admiral Kang Do-hyun stood on the bridge of the Steady Hand, and looked out at the fleet through the main viewport. Behind him, his crew worked in focused silence. Every station was manned. Every system was green. 4,000 ships waited for his word. He opened a fleet-wide channel. His voice was calm, the way it always was, but there was something underneath it now, something that had not been there before. Every officer and soldier in the fleet heard it. Every single one. They thought we were soft because we chose peace, he said. They thought our kindness was weakness. They thought because we loved our children and sang them songs and held their hands, we were not dangerous. He paused. The silence across 4,000 ships was absolute. Let us teach them what we were keeping the peace from. The stars stretched into lines of white light, and then they were gone. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. Warlord Commander Dravek was eating when the first reports came in. He sat at the head of a long stone table on Velshi Prime, surrounded by his officers and advisors, celebrating what he called the most successful demonstration of power in Dominion history. Other species had already begun sending envoys, eager to sign non-aggression pacts, eager to stay on the right side of the Empire that had just humiliated humanity in front of the entire galaxy. Dravek chewed his food slowly and enjoyed every bite. The humans had been silent for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of nothing. No response. No fleet movements. No angry messages. The silence tasted like victory. Then Sub-Commander Torek walked into the room with a face that looked like it had been carved from gray stone. "Commander," he said, "the humans are at the border." Dravek did not stop eating. He picked a piece of meat from his teeth with one long claw and looked at Torek with mild interest. "How many ships?" Torek swallowed. 4,000. The room went quiet. Dravek put down his food. The Terran First Fleet had dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Velshi territory in perfect formation. 4,000 warships, arranged in a wall of dark metal that stretched across the starfield like a curtain being drawn closed. They did not fire. They did not advance. They simply appeared, silent and still, and waited. Then a message was broadcast on every Velshi frequency, military and civilian, across the entire Dominion. Admiral Kang Do-hyun's voice filled every ship, every station, every home. It was calm and even and completely without emotion. "You have 12 standard hours to surrender every individual involved in the attack on the colony ship Morning Star. This is the only time this offer will be made." Dravek listened to the message in his command center. He played it twice. It was a deep, rattling sound, and his officers laughed with him, because that was what you did when Dravek laughed. He opened a return channel and sent back a recording that one of his soldiers had taken during the Morning Star boarding. It showed a Velshi soldier knocking a human child to the ground with the back of his hand. Dravek added a single line of text beneath it, a slur in the Velshi language that translated roughly to "weeping animals." He mobilized the full Dominion fleet. 6,000 warships surged toward the border, confident in their numbers, confident in their strength, confident that the soft humans would break the moment real pressure was applied. Dravek stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched his fleet fill the space around him, and he felt like a god. The 12 hours passed. Do-hyun did not send a second message. The Terran fleet moved forward. What happened next would be studied by military academies across the galaxy for the next 500 years. The Velshi expected a battle. What they got was a lesson. The human ships did not fight the way the galaxy expected. They did not form lines and exchange fire like every other species did. Instead, they broke apart into thousands of small groups that moved together like flocks of birds, shifting and turning and reforming with a speed that should not have been possible for ships that size. They performed micro-jumps, tiny hyperspace hops that let them vanish from one position and reappear behind the enemy in the blink of an eye. The Velshi would lock weapons on a target, and the target would simply stop being there. Captain Yun-Nari led the vanguard aboard the Iron Cradle, and she cut through the Velshi formations like a blade through paper. Her ship moved with terrifying precision, striking weak points in the enemy lines, and pulling away before the Velshi could respond. Her crew worked in silence. There were no shouts, no war cries, no music playing over the speakers, just the quiet sound of consoles beeping and officers calling out coordinates in steady voices. It was the silence that scared the Velshi the most. Predators were supposed to roar. These humans did not make a sound. The first engagement lasted 4 hours. The Velshi lost 1,800 ships. The humans lost 212. Dravek stared at the battle reports, and for the first time felt something he had never felt in his entire life. He did not have a word for it, because the Velshi language did not have a word for fear. He ordered a retreat to the inner systems. The humans followed. The second engagement happened at the Velshi colony world of Drekis. Dravek had positioned his remaining ships in a defensive formation around the planet, using the orbital stations as shields. It was a classic Velshi tactic, one that had broken a dozen smaller species. Do-Hyun studied the formation for less than an hour. Then he sent electromagnetic pulse waves ahead of his fleet, massive invisible bursts of energy that washed over the Velshi ships and shut down their systems like candles being blown out. 1,200 Velshi ships went dark and drifted, powerless, their crews alive but helpless, floating in silence, while the Terran fleet passed through them without firing a single additional shot. Dravik ran. He pulled his remaining forces back to Velshi Prime, the homeworld, the most heavily defended planet in the Dominion. He activated every orbital defense station, every ground-based weapon, every shield generator. He called in every reserve unit, every patrol ship, every armed transport. He fortified Velshi Prime with everything the Dominion had left, and told his officers that the humans would break against these walls like water against rock. Torek stood in the back of the command center and said nothing. He had watched the battle recordings. He had seen what the humans did at Drekis, how they disabled ships instead of destroying them, how they left crews alive when they could have killed them all. He understood something that Dravik did not. The humans were not fighting in a blind rage. They were not out of control. Every strike, every movement, every decision was calculated and deliberate. They were choosing exactly how much force to use, and they were holding back. That was what terrified Torek most of all. They were holding back, and they were still winning. 3 days later, the Terran fleet arrived at Velshi Prime. 4,000 ships emerged from hyperspace and surrounded the planet in a sphere of dark metal. Every orbital defense station was targeted simultaneously. In 90 minutes, all of them were disabled. Not destroyed, disabled. The humans knocked the teeth out of the Dominion's mouth without killing a single Velshi civilian. Silence fell over Velshi Prime. The entire planet looked up at the sky and saw the human fleet hanging above them like a judgment. Admiral Kang Do-Hyun opened a channel to the surface. It was still calm, still steady, still perfectly controlled. "You are not being invaded," he said. "You are being held accountable. Send us the ones who hurt our children, or there will be nothing left to send them from." Dravek, standing in his command center with his claws digging into the metal table, stared at the screen showing the human fleet above his world. His mouth was open, but no sound came out. He had wanted the galaxy to see humanity break. Instead, the galaxy was watching the Velshi Dominion fall. The galaxy watched. For the first time in living memory, every species in the Galactic Neutral Assembly stopped what they were doing and turned their attention to a single point in space. Velshi Prime, the homeworld of the Dominion, surrounded by 4,000 human warships, trapped under a ceiling of dark metal and cold silence. Nobody had expected this. Not the elder species, who had dismissed humans as emotional and weak. Not the younger civilizations, who had been scrambling to steal Terran border systems. Not the diplomats, the traders, the warlords, or the scholars. A mid-tier species had just torn through the most aggressive military power in the region in less than a standard month, and was now sitting above their enemy's homeworld with its finger on the trigger. The galaxy did not know what to do with this information, so it simply watched and held its breath. Elder Ilmara of the Neutral Assembly contacted Admiral Do-hyun directly from the assembly chambers. She was an old creature, tall and thin, with silver skin that shifted color with her emotions. She had served as a mediator for over 60 years, and she had never once spoken to a human military commander during an active conflict. She did not enjoy the experience. "Admiral," she said, her voice careful and measured, "the Assembly urges you to show restraint. The destruction of a homeworld would set a precedent that the galaxy cannot accept. You would turn every species against you." Do-hyun looked at her image on his screen. His face showed nothing. "Elder Ilmara," he said, "the Velshi broadcast the murder of our children to the galaxy on open channels. Your assembly responded with a letter expressing concern. You did not sanction them. You did not condemn them. You moved to the next item on your schedule." He paused. "The galaxy's opinion is no longer a factor in our calculations." She closed the channel without another word. On Velshi Prime, Dravik was losing control. The planet's military forces were intact, but the fleet above them had turned the sky into a cage. No ship could leave, no signal could get out without human permission. The population, billions of Velshi citizens, who had spent their lives being told that their species was the strongest in the galaxy, looked up at the human ships and felt the ground shift beneath their understanding of the universe. Dravik responded the way he always did, with force. He declared total military law. He ordered every civilian to remain indoors. He positioned ground-based weapons on top of residential buildings, and announced publicly that if the humans attacked, civilian blood would be on their hands. He was using his own people as shields, and he did not care who knew it. Do-hyun studied the situation from the bridge of the steady hand. His intelligence officers showed him the positions of every ground weapon, every military installation, every government building on the planet's surface. They showed him the civilian buildings that Dravik was hiding behind. They showed him the population centers, the schools, the hospitals, the homes. Do-hyun gave his orders. The Terran fleet began striking targets on the surface. Military bases vanished in flashes of white light. Government communication towers folded and fell. Shipyards melted into slag. Weapons platforms exploded in neat, contained bursts that did not touch the buildings next to them. Every single strike was surgical. Every single strike was precise. The humans hit exactly what they aimed at, and nothing else. 0 civilian casualties. Dravik watched his military infrastructure disappear piece by piece, and he understood the message the humans were sending. It was not spoken aloud. It did not need to be. The message was simple. We could destroy everything. We are choosing not to. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand that your survival is not because you are strong, but because we have decided to let you live? On the other side of the galaxy, diplomat Han Yuna stood before the full Galactic Assembly. She had requested an emergency session, and the Assembly had granted it, mostly because they were terrified of what might happen if they did not. Every seat was filled. Every screen was active. Hundreds of species watched the small human woman walk to the center of the chamber and stand there, alone, looking up at the gathered representatives of the known galaxy. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. 3 weeks ago, she said, the Velshi Dominion attacked an unarmed colony ship carrying 2,000 civilians. 600 of them were children. She touched a control on her wrist, and the original Velshi broadcast played on every screen in the chamber. The sound of screaming filled the room. Delegates flinched. Some looked away. Yuna did not look away. She watched it with them, standing straight and still. When the footage ended, she spoke again. 198 children were killed. She pressed another control. A list appeared on the screens. Names, ages, photos, small faces smiling at the camera, gap-toothed and bright-eyed. Beside each photo was a single line, something that had been taken from school records. What they wanted to be when they grew up. Marine biologist, starship pilot, doctor, artist, chef, teacher, like Miss Jiwoo. Yuna read every name out loud, all 198. The chamber was silent. Some delegates were shaking. One ambassador from a species known for their emotional control had tears running down their face. When she finished, Yuna looked up at the assembly and said, "You called us soft. You looked at our kindness and saw weakness. You watched us love our children and thought it made us less." She took a breath. "We were not soft. We were gentle. There is a difference, and you are learning it today." She left the chamber without waiting for a response. On Velshi Prime, the ground was shifting. Sub-Commander Torek had spent 3 days gathering allies among the officers who could see what Dravek could not. The war was over. The Dominion had lost. The only question now was whether Velshi Prime would survive, and every hour that Dravek refused to surrender, the answer became less certain. Torek moved on the 4th night. His faction struck fast and hard, taking control of the Central Command building in under 2 hours. Dravek fought. He killed 3 of Torek's soldiers with his own claws before they brought him down. When they pinned him to the floor, his black eyes were wild with fury, and he screamed that Torek was a traitor, a coward, a disgrace to the Dominion. Torek looked down at him and said, "You murdered children and called it strength. You are the disgrace." The soldiers who had boarded the Morning Star were identified, rounded up, and placed in a transport shuttle. Torek sent a message to the human fleet. "We are sending you the ones responsible, all of them. We ask that you spare our world." The shuttle rose from the surface and drifted up toward the ring of human ships. Nari's iron cradle moved forward to receive it. The shuttle docked. The prisoners were taken aboard in restraints. Nari looked at them as they were led past her. She said nothing. She did not need to. Admiral Do-hyun received confirmation that all prisoners were in Terran custody. He sat in his chair on the bridge for a moment, looking at the planet below, the planet he could destroy with a single order. Then he did something the galaxy did not expect. He powered down his weapons. Every ship in the Terran fleet went dark, their weapon systems shutting down in sequence. A wave of silence rolling across 4,000 warships. Do-hyun opened a channel to Velshi Prime, to the entire planet, to every citizen who was watching. "We came for those who killed our children," he said. "We have them. Your species' future is your own. But you will remember that it exists only because we allowed it to." The fleet began to turn. As the Iron Cradle prepared to jump to hyperspace, a message arrived on Nari's personal channel. It was from Park Ji-woo, the teacher who had saved 19 children in the dark. Attached was a drawing made by Soyi, the little girl with the colored pencils. It showed a yellow sun with a smiling face, surrounded by small stars, and across the bottom, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for keeping us safe." Nari looked at the drawing for a long time. Then she pinned it above her command console, sat down in her chair, and ordered the jump home. 6 months passed, and the galaxy was not the same place it had been before. The change was not sudden. It was not a single moment or a single event that rewrote the rules of galactic civilization. It was slower than that, deeper than that, like a crack spreading through a sheet of ice, until the whole surface shifts, and what was underneath is finally visible. Every species, every government, every military commander and diplomat and trader in the known galaxy quietly adjusted their understanding of the universe to include a new and uncomfortable truth. Humans were not what they had seemed. They had never been what they seemed. The old words that the galaxy had used to describe humanity, soft, emotional, sentimental, harmless, disappeared from diplomatic language almost overnight. Nobody used them anymore. In their place, a new phrase appeared, first as a whisper among diplomats, then as a warning passed between military officers, and finally as a proverb that every species taught to their young: "Do not touch the children." It was not a law. It was not written in any treaty or agreement. It did not need to be. Everyone knew what it meant, and everyone knew what would happen if it was ignored. The Velshi Dominion was gone. Not destroyed, dissolved. The political structure that Dravek had built, the empire of conquest and cruelty, collapsed under the weight of its own failure. The worlds that had been taken by force broke away. The officers who had served under Dravek either surrendered or vanished into the edges of known space. What was left was Velshi Prime, battered and humiliated, trying to rebuild from the wreckage of everything it had been. Sub-Commander Torek, the officer who had led the coup against Dravek, became the new leader. Not a warlord, not a commander. He took the title of First Speaker, a civilian title, the first time a Velshi leader had used one in over 300 years. His first official act was to open diplomatic channels with Earth. His second was to make a public statement that was broadcast to every Velshi world. The attack on the Morning Star was not strength, he said, standing in the ruins of the old command center. It was cowardice. It was cruelty. And it nearly ended us. We were spared not because we deserved mercy, but because the humans chose to give it. We must become a species worthy of that choice. It was not a popular speech among all Velshi. Some hated Torek for it. Some called him weak. But the majority listened because they had seen the human fleet above their sky, and they had understood something that would take generations to fully accept. The humans had been strong enough to destroy them, and had chosen not to. That was a kind of power the Velshi had never imagined. Dravek and the soldiers who had attacked the Morning Star were tried before a joint tribunal, half human, half galactic assembly representatives. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. The Velshi broadcast of the massacre, which Dravek had been so proud of, was played in full. The testimony of survivors was heard. Jiwoo gave her account from a chair, because she still could not stand for long periods, and she described the 9 hours in the maintenance tunnel in a voice that was steady and clear and broke the hearts of everyone in the room. Dravek showed no remorse. He stood in the dock and looked at the tribunal with his black eyes, and said that the weak existed to be consumed by the strong. He said it was the natural order. He said he would do it again. The tribunal found all defendants guilty. Humanity had abolished the death penalty centuries ago, not out of weakness, but out of a belief that killing a helpless prisoner made you something you did not want to be. Instead, Dravek and his soldiers were sentenced to life imprisonment on a station orbiting the Hana system, the star system that the Morning Star had been traveling to, the world those children never reached. Every day, through the station windows, the prisoners could see the planet turning below them, green and blue and alive, full of the future that had been stolen from 198 children. It was a punishment far worse than death, and it was designed to be. Admiral Kang Do-hyun retired from active service. He had never wanted to be a war hero, and he did not enjoy being treated as one. He returned to Earth and took a position teaching military ethics at a university in Seoul. His first class was full of young students who looked at him like he was a legend. He stood at the front of the room, a quiet man with gray hair and calm eyes, and he told them something that none of them expected. The measure of a civilization is not whether it can destroy, he said. Any fool with a big enough weapon can destroy. The measure of a civilization is whether it can choose not to. Remember that. It is the only lesson that matters. Captain Yoon Nari was promoted to admiral. She took command of a new defense initiative, a fleet of patrol ships designed specifically to escort civilian vessels through deep space. The first ship of the new class rolled out of the shipyard above Earth's moon, painted silver and white, fast and armed and beautiful. Its name was written on the hull in letters that caught the starlight. Morning Star. Nari stood at the launching ceremony and watched the ship slide out into the black. And she touched the pocket where she still carried Soi's drawing, folded small and worn soft at the edges. Park Ji-woo healed slowly. Her arms mended. The nightmares did not. But she returned to teaching because that was who she was, and she would not let Dravik take that from her. She moved to the colony in the Hana system, the world the Morning Star had been meant to reach, and she opened a school there. Her first class was made up of 19 students, the same 19 children she had hidden in the dark. They were older now, quieter, and they carried things behind their eyes that children should not carry. But they were alive. The school was named Byeol, which meant star in the old Korean language, and on its wall was a plaque with 198 names, the children who did not make it. Every morning, Ji-woo's students walked past those names on their way to class, and every morning they remembered. Diplomat Han Yuna was appointed as Earth's permanent representative to the Galactic Assembly. Under her steady hand, a new Galactic Accord was drafted. It was called the Innocent Shield Doctrine, and its terms were simple. Any deliberate attack on civilian non-combatants, particularly children, by any species, would be met with a unified galactic military response. Not a letter of concern, not a formal expression, a response. The vote was unanimous. Every species signed, not because they all agreed with it in principle, but because they had seen what happened when one species hurt human children. And none of them wanted to find out what would happen if it was their children next. Years later, a young alien ambassador arrived at the Galactic Assembly for her first day. She was nervous and eager, and she asked an elder delegate from a neighboring system for advice. The elder was old enough to remember the galaxy before the Morning Star, and he looked at the young ambassador with the tired patience of someone who had learned his lessons the hard way. "You may scheme against the others," he said. "You may test borders. You may play power games and form alliances and break them. That is how the galaxy works. But there is one rule that is above all other rules, and if you break it, nothing else will save you." The young ambassador leaned forward. "What rule?" The elder looked across the chamber toward the Terran delegation. Han Yuna was sitting there, calm and composed, reviewing documents. Behind her, on the wall of the Terran section, was a small-framed drawing of a yellow sun with a smiling face, surrounded by little stars. The elder stared at it for a long moment, and something old and heavy moved behind his eyes. He turned back to the young ambassador. "Never," he said, "hurt their children." The young ambassador looked at the Terran delegation. She looked at the drawing on the wall. She looked at the elder's face. She did not ask why. She did not need to.